You know, we said at the beginning of the session that one of the things that we wanted to try to do was to inform the public and let them know that in fact there are alternative points of view as to what's happening in the legislature, but also to explain some of the things. And we said that we hoped all of the media would take part in this, and so far most of the media has chosen not to, and I think that's unfortunate. We do thank Hawaii Reporter for being here today, Mr. Wiles. We will continue to outsource our information here. But I think it's really important that we get some of these statements on record and that the public knows that there are, in fact, different points of view. I mention this because I know that 15, 20 years ago I was talking about the problems with the employees' retirement system and that we had to change things. And I, along with then Senator Colleen Hanabusa, supported Governor Cayetano in his historic reformation of collective bargaining and civil service reform. And the idea was, based on a legislative auditor's report, if we don't do something, the employees' retirement system, the health care system, we're going to bankrupt the state. Well, he changed the statement direction. We all voted for it. We made that change. As soon as he was out of office, the majority Democrats went right back to where things were. And nothing has been changed for new employees. And let me stress this point again, because I've always said government has an obligation. If people rely on promises that were made and make their financial and life decisions based on that, then the government owes that responsibility, even if it's very costly. But government also has a responsibility to make changes for new employees, and we have not done that, either in the retirement system or health care. It was a very interesting meeting yesterday. The governor finally released his budget, a month and a half overdue, to a joint briefing of both the House Finance and Senate Ways and Means committees in the auditorium. I think it was interesting that, first of all, the governor, by law, is required to give a 2-year fiscal budget and a 6-year fiscal plan. And we have not gotten the 6-year plan. What we got was fiscal year 12 and fiscal year 13. And what we got was a tremendously bloated, in my humble opinion, budget that we can neither afford nor effectuate. The budget for the 2 fiscal periods is a whopping record-breaking $23 billion. It is based on tax increases, fee increases, a reduction in some services, and a very vague 5% take-back of public service employee salaries. I say vague because there were questions asked yesterday and they weren't answered. And I think that's very difficult for anybody, regardless of political party, to get their hands around. We are going to go into the serious part of the legislative session starting tomorrow in terms of grappling with the budgetary issues, both the Senate Ways and Means Committee and also House Finance. Tomorrow also marks the start of the mandatory 5-day recess. Today is the 23rd day of the 60-day session. We're more than a third of the way finished. We don't have a budget. We know that a lot of these fiscal considerations are not going to be resolved until the very last week of the session after the conference committee. So it's a very difficult time. What we do know also, though, is that a lot of people in the community are very distressed, particularly older people, those on fixed incomes, pensioners, because of the tax implications. And the governor just doesn't seem to get it about how people would be and are affected, even the uncertainty. We know that uncertainty is what drives the New York Stock Exchange, the market. We see what international issues are doing to that market right now, and the price of petroleum and so forth. But here at home, we see that a lot of taxes enacted last year are either going into effect or they're having their effect right now. We're seeing a lot of surcharges for our basic industries, shipping and utilities. We don't see a major economic turnaround as has been forecast. The visitor industry is stronger, and that's good news. But when we look at other industries, manufacturing, which is practically non-existent, retailing, which is struggling, and all small businesses which are having a difficult time. We see that it is a time of uncertainty, and so for the state to go ahead and increase the budget like no other state is doing at this time is frankly quite bizarre and unattainable. The legislature, as the governor said, has the final word, and a lot of these things will be probably dismissed, and that sets up the issue of the Trojan horse, and that is the general excise tax. It's kind of like Brer Rabbit. Please, Brer Bear, do anything but don't throw me in that briar patch. Please, 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 don't throw me in that briar patch. And in the end, he goes in the briar patch because that's what he wanted. I see that, and I don't think it's conspiratorial, but I see that as the overall plan. As some of these tax increases and proposals fall by the wayside, they'll throw up their hands and say, well, we promised no GET, but doggone it, heck, we got to have that general excise tax increase, which is the most regressive of taxes, which is the only gross income tax of its kind in the nation. And my forecast is that by the end of the session, we will be seriously debating it. Hopefully, we'll be able to defeat that increase, but if we do, those budget estimates have to fall because there's no way that we can sustain that. Moving on into some other areas, I had mentioned a couple weeks ago about one of the areas that's not getting any publicity at all, any traction, and yet I think it's very important. And that is the Hawaiian issues, Native Hawaiian issues. The Native Hawaiian or Hawaiian Affairs Committee in the Senate is very well organized. They've had a lot of key bills that they have heard and passed thus far. And what the public doesn't realize, and what the media, mainstream media, doesn't seem to be interested in, is that what they're trying to do with a number of these bills is to skirt the federal issue of the Akaka bill. Akaka bill has gone on now for nearly 12 years, has no traction, even though the local newspaper continues to say that its passage is imminent. It's been doing that for 10 years, almost every week. It's not imminent, it's not going to happen. And so what the Native Hawaiian Caucus is basically doing is doing an end run around that and trying to have a state form of Akaka bill and a state form of Native Hawaiian recognition. In addition to that, there are a number of bills that put Native Hawaiian advisory councils in positions of authority in almost every agency and almost every major program. This would have a tremendous fiscal and social impact on the state, and as I say, it's not getting very much traction, but these bills are moving along. Another bill that hasn't gotten too much publicity but really is important, and that is the issue of the so-called undersea energy cable from the neighbor islands to Oahu. The estimated cost of this project is anywhere from $1 to $3 billion just in the construction costs alone. It is not a very feasible project. There are areas where they have used undersea cable for energy delivery, but none with open ocean and with the kinds of problems that we have. Hawaiian Electric, upon questioning them, I asked them in a committee, they said the cost is only $800 million. I think that's terribly underinflated and unrealistic. There's a lot of money to be had, and there's a lot of rate increases to be had by the already highest paying electricity users in the state. There's also the issue of whether the island of Lanai and Maui County wants to be known for windmills and wind turbines all over every square inch of the property. So there's a lot of issues, but there's a lot of people that stand to gain from this particular undersea cable, and it's not getting a lot of traction again. We were schmoozed a week and a half ago by some of the big stars in the movie industry who were here for Relativity Pictures. Relativity Pictures, a very successful business operation. And I stress business because more than movies, they are really an institutional player and an investment firm. My understanding is they had more than $2 billion of revenues last year. They have some very good movies which I've seen and enjoyed. But they were here and basically they wanted to quadruple the film tax credit. They wanted to add additional exemptions from the transit accommodation tax and from other costs, which would primarily benefit them and their syndication. Now, just as an aside, we have film tax credits right now. which companies utilize. I just went to see the Adam Sandler movie last Saturday night, enjoyed it thoroughly. Adam Sandler is someone who's a part-time resident in Hawaii. He does a lot for Hawaii. He loves Hawaii, makes no bones about it. The movie was terrific for Hawaii, particularly the island of Maui. He didn't ask for, his production company, Happy Madison, didn't ask for any special treatment or additional credits. Hawaii Five-0 didn't ask for any special treatment or additional credits. So one must ask why Relativity has asked for that. By the way, I voted no on the bill, even though the bill has been scaled down. They did have a very fancy soiree at the Mandalay restaurant, invited legislators only. Now, we know it's suspect when they don't invite the media or the staff, because the staff likes to eat. And for them to be excluded, we know there's something wrong. But they did have Roseanne there, and she would make up for what the staff would have eaten anyway. So I look at this from the standpoint that we want to encourage industries, we want to remove barriers to entry, but we can't do it by giving tax credits or special treatment to certain performers within an industry. What we have to do is improve our business climate altogether. And so basically, that's my report up to this date, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions.
So Sam, do you think the governor's budget's DOA is dead on arrival? Or?
No, it's not dead on arrival because of the massive Democrat support that we've got in both the House and the Senate. However, my colleagues are very concerned, as well they should be. And so I think that a lot of those things will be reduced. I'm not sure how much of the spending will actually be reduced, but it will be reduced by the end of the session. And that's why I made the statement about the general excise tax. The pension tax is not going to fly. That's DOA. That I can guarantee you. Whether they use a 37,000% ceiling or floor or 75,000. It's just the idea of going after old people and the pensions. And I always enjoy when the governor says, I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do. Of course, he has 3 pensions right now, and not many of us have 3 pensions at all. So I think it's very disingenuous. And I think he is, I was asked, I think he is a true believer in the things that he's advocating. But knowing him, as I have for 50 years, knowing him in office for 40 years, knowing him as a congressman for 20 years, there's no surprises about the governor. We know his proclivity to spending, we know his proclivity to taxation, and we know his proclivity to increasing government. That's where he's coming from. But a lot of these legislators, many of whom are up for a re-election next year, are going to have to wrestle with these issues.
You mentioned the GE tax.
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen there? I mean, in terms of proposals, how big of a tax?
Well, let's face it. You know, you can talk about taxing soda, you can talk about taxing bread, you can talk about taxing everything else, and in the grand scheme of things, those are small taxes. The GET is what drives the revenues of the state. And I think that probably what's going to happen, and you know, there's no time to introduce new bills, but there are short form bills that are still floating around. We know what can happen in conference committee, and we also know the wonderful procedure called gut and replace. So to say that, oh no, you can't do it, it's too late in the session, that's just not true. My personal opinion is somebody is going to propose a 1% general excise tax increase. And then everybody will get all excited about that, and they'll say, okay, all right, let's only do a 0.5%. And I think that's what's going to emerge out of all of this.
Do you know how much that raises by any chance? 0.5%?
Yeah, 0.5%, about $500 million per year. And that's a lot of money. And again, let's make it clear, a lot of people still don't understand that we do not have a sales tax. We are the only state out of 50 that has a general excise gross income tax. So when you say, gee, it's only 4%, it's only 4.5% on Oahu, and look at California, it's 8%, 9%. Not a fair comparison at all. We are a gross income tax on every good and service transaction.
Do you think he proposed an increase in spending, the governor did? Do you think those will stand?
I think some of them might. The interesting thing is, the information that I have is that his department heads wanted a lot more. And yesterday, he and the budget director talked about these expenditures not in terms of increases but in restoration, restoring cuts that had been made. And even some of my colleagues are saying, well, look, you know, some of these cuts may have been justified. It's interesting because the two things that you hear in every hearing from every department head is we're underfunded, we're understaffed, we're overworked, we can't do the job, and that darn Lingle administration. That 8 years, boy, they took us into the wilderness. Now we're simply trying to come out of the wilderness. Well, the problem is, as I say, every other state is facing crisis, and we are too.
Any specific thing that you think will withstand the budget process where he's proposed an increase?
I think he's going to have difficulties with the constitutional issue involving Medicare Plan B, for example, and pensions. But everybody loves to gang up on sin taxes as described, and so I think it would be easier to pass the 50% tax on alcohol. But we're talking about minimal amounts of revenue. The sugary beverage tax, even though it could result in the loss of jobs and the loss of businesses here, we're doing it for the cakey. We're doing it for the the obese little ones. We don't want parents to be responsible. We want the nanny government and the Department of Health to be responsible. So I think some of those things, in fact, may slip through. Also, taxes that have already been passed, like the barrel tax, they're already talking about increasing that for more agricultural inspectors and to do more of the functions that had been done by government before and are not being done, or because there are reductions in personnel. Yesterday, Senator Kim, asked a question as to how many new employees were going to be added, and there were 236. That was the number that appears in the governor's budget and what he gave, plus an additional 3 employees at a cost of $192,000 a year to operate the civil unions bill, which will be signed into law at 2 o'clock today.